Hey traders! Last week's analysis was really on point. I was really excited, offered some great trading opportunities, and it was just an excellent week for me. I hope you had a good week as well. I am not in my office and I'm using the laptop today, so bear with me. Not the best mic, but we'll get through this. Now let's get some analysis done. Alright, so here is the US dollar currency index. Last week, price came right down to the pivot and it held as I expected. Price started coming up. We are now getting the new weekly pivot is right here around the 94.80 level. Continue going to look at this to hold since we are there and also at the yearly R level. Continually look for price to head higher. If price happens to get to below, look for price to stay below the weekly pivot, but I currently see the US dollar to continually gain strength from here. Alright, euro dollar. Last week's weekly pivot did hold. The new weekly pivot is around the 1632 level. Looking for this level to hold and for price to continue heading lower. Also makes a great pullback area to retest the trend line. US dollar, Canadian dollar. Found some support off the monthly pivot. This week we'll be opening up below the weekly pivot. Continually look for this area to hold. Until we either get above the weekly or below the monthly. Price does stabilize above the weekly. Look for price to continue higher. If you start seeing closing prices happen below the monthly pivot, look for prices to continue heading lower. Right now we're in the middle. It's kind of no man's land. Not interested in trading it unless it gets above those two levels. Pound dollar. Pound dollar is currently below the weekly. Look for price to stabilize and continually head lower. Could even start the week off with price continually going down to the yearly pivot. If price does get above the weekly pivot, then look for it to retest the monthly. Australian dollar. Price is currently below the weekly pivot and heading lower. The weekly pivot does make a great area for a retest. For price to continue lower. For now, look for this low right here to act as a support until we break through. New Zealand dollar. The weekly pivot is currently at the same place as it was last week. With the yearly and the monthly keeping price currently where it's at, I'll be looking for price to head lower. Do, however, keep in mind that since we are opening the market just above the weekly pivot, price can continually hold in this area here. Any close below the weekly level, look to sell. Dollar Swiss did exactly as expected last week, came down, tested the weekly pivot, continued higher. Price is opening above the yearly and the weekly. Continually look for price to gain strength. If we get a close below, look for price to start heading lower towards the monthly pivot. Dollar yen. Dollar yen is still currently holding at the range top. Weekly chart does show that we have a lot more room to head higher. However, look for the weekly pivot to hold. Find support in this range for price to continually head higher. If this top does hold, look for price to get under the weekly pivot for selling opportunities towards the monthly pivot. Euro pound. Euro pound is currently open above the weekly and the monthly. look for support and for price to continue higher. If price does get below, look for price to get below this 88.38, 88.40 range for price to head lower. Alright, Euro Yen is opening above the weekly, however it is bouncing off the monthly pivot. Keep an eye to see if there's any support above the weekly. If price does get below the weekly, look for price to continually to head lower. And for buying, I would not buy unless we get above the monthly pivot to head higher. Alright, Guppy. Price is opening below the weekly. Currently finding some support off the yearly pivot. I would like to see price come back to the weekly and the monthly here to look for opportunities to sell. Yearly pivots are strong. Anything below the yearly pivot will give us a stronger selling opportunity. If price does retrace and get above the weekly and the monthly, look for price to continually head higher. Alright, Pound CAD had a great trade off of this last week. Bought right off the weekly pivot. Price continually higher and currently continued higher and I was able to take profits at the black pivot point. Prices since then became lower, bounced off of last week's pivot. We will see, the new weekly pivot is just above. I'm only interested in selling the Pound CAD well below this level. With this current bounce, it would not surprise me if price continually just heads lower. And Euro Swiss. Euro Swiss is opening below the weekly pivot. Price has broken out. Or closed on this trend line. I can't say it's officially broken out. Look for price to either stabilize here and continue higher off the weekly pivot, or look for price to continue heading lower. Australian Yen. Price is opening below the weekly pivot and the monthly pivot. Continue to look for this area to continually go bearish. While below these levels, I'm looking for price to continue heading lower. If price gets above the monthly, I'll then be looking for reasons to buy. So that's it. I really hope everyone enjoyed my analysis, and I hope you have a great trading week. Take care.